another thing that happened was that the girls, some of the girls, went after the couples who went into civilian clothing, and it was difficult to find them, but they went after the couples. And there were things that they were doing. They made them clean the latrines, and they pushed their heads into the... But there was such a, like almost a cathartic need to let them do whatever they were doing. And then the partisans, you asked the question, the Czechoslovakian partisans came out from the forest and came to us, asking names and questions and things like that. And they were very helpful, because the time that nobody was there, it was the partisans who kept a little bit of order. They couldn't restrain everybody, because people went wild, but they tried. They kept, like for instance, they worked with me, and I worked with them to subdue, to talk about hygiene, to talk about not eating that kind of food, and waiting, you know, because I think we had 2 deaths from overeating. After not having eaten anything, to eat raw meat, it was horrible. Eventually the Russians came. The Russians took over that part, and they arrested everybody, and they permitted us. I couldn't do that either. I could incite other people to do that. I couldn't do it myself. They permitted to throw stones and to spit, but they collected them. They sent them all the couples that were in charge, and they sent them all to Russia. They said they will send them to Siberia. They took him away from the people that were in the camp. You must be right. Now, the more I think about it, the more I believe that there must have been much more. We weren't in the center, but there were much more barracks like ours, a little bit removed from a center sort of a camp. The partisans who were taking care of us while there was no man's land, we asked them, and I and 2 or 3 other girls, those that came from that we came together from Auschwitz, not with the new people, but with the old people from Auschwitz, the old prisoners. They gave us a ride on a jeep to the nearest town so we can get the train. And they got us tickets on the train because they were partisans, and they knew the people in town and so on. And unfortunately, when the train broke down, and the tracks were broken someplace before Brno, so we all sat down we were sitting, and I had my little package. We were sitting relaxing for a while, and then they told us that they will not be able to fix it. We better start walking. So at that point, somebody sent me to inquire about something, because I knew the people and I spoke Czechoslovakian. And when I came back, my package was gone. Somebody stole all my earthly possessions. That was the sweater and the extra thing. But it was warm, so I didn't really need the coat I had on me. And when we came into the outskirts of Brno, there were people standing from the very beginning of the town, and even in the little villages before, with big pots of soup and ladles. And as we were coming by, they were feeding us. They were giving us food. And they couldn't accommodate, because there were many of us. So we eventually went to Brno to a hotel. A couple of us got a room. You know, I'm trying to think who I was with. I don't remember one single girl. And we were together for a couple of months. And in Brno we were together for a while. And there we got the hotel with a beautiful room. And we almost broke the mattress, because it's the first time after so many years that we have seen a mattress and a feather bed. There were no linen, but it was there. So we divided in one room. There was 5 of us or something like that. But we had to work for our keep, like peel potatoes or do something for that hotel. So we got soup for the meal. And in the street one day, I met 2 Jewish, British soldiers, Polish, whatever, but they were in the British Army. And they were out of the army, and even though Russia was there, and they said they are going to get a car and they are going to go back to Poland. They have relatives in Poland. They had some permission of someplace. They took a Czechoslovakian driver and they took a car, and I asked them and they took me with them to go back to Krakow. I told them, any place in Poland you let me off. I wanted to go back to see what happened to my mother. So when we went from Brno to Moravska Ostrava, on the way, I got myself arrested. The Russians stopped us on a checkpoint. Those men had some sort of papers from the army or whatever, and they wore the uniforms. I had absolutely nothing. So I spoke to them, and they say to me, how do we know you are not the German woman who just made the number for herself? So I said to them, as I told you, I was fresh. I answered everybody. I said, if you would use your brains, you would know that the number, a tattoo, that was made now or even 2 weeks ago looks different than a tattoo that was made 2.5 years ago. They just don't look the same. You don't have papers, and from all I know, I don't know, you are a Yevreika. Yevreika means a Yidin, a Jew, a Jewess. And they gave me, and this was like on the Parkway, on the Belt Parkway, they had a station where so they took a Czechoslovakian soldier, and they told him to bring me back to Marish Ostrov, to the prison. And while I was going with the Czechoslovakian soldier, I tried to appeal to him like I once appealed to a Polish young man, and he let me go. He didn't have to bring me all the way to the prison, but he just let me go, and I hitchhiked from there on a truck, on an army truck, into the city, and I met the two guys again, and with them I went to Poland. And in Krakow I lost track of them. And I tried to get hold of somebody with the Jewish Joint Distribution, because I thought that by now my father might be from South America in New York, because my father had two brothers here. But I could not get in touch with them, and I didn't hear anything from him. So I again went to the Jewish Joint Distribution, and I gave an ad or whatever. I asked them to give it through the Red Cross on the radio. And that's how my family found out about me, on the radio. Somebody heard it on the radio. And I still, for a long time, I went to the Polish people that, with whom I was when I was arrested, who had the dog, whose dogs, and I went to them. Of course, the kids were big already, and they lived in a very small quarters, and she found me a job. You see, the grandfather and the grandmother that were in that family, there was a grandfather, a grandmother, a daughter, and two grandchildren. So the grandfather was a rentgenologist working for a hospital. So he found me a job to work for a doctor, to be a governess for a child. And I figured until I hear from my father or from anybody, or until I could get enough money to take a train to go to Helm to see that my mother is there, I will be working for him. And one day, but I wrote to Helm, and I got an answer. My father's youngest sister's husband survived in Russia. And he wrote me a letter that my mother died and all kinds of stuff. And then when I got the letter, I was hysterical. Of course, all the time I didn't cry, because all the time I had to be on an alert, and I kind of almost didn't think. That's why there are many names that I forgot, because I just put it out. I had to function. I had to live. I went back to Helm, and the reaction of the people in my hometown, where my father was born, where his mother was born, when his father was born, with so many people, it was a horrible. They, instead of saying, how nice, they couldn't understand how we survived. None of our colleagues from school, the lady that I talked about, she was nice, but none of our colleagues from school accepted our survival. There were only few of us that came back, and of course it meant a great deal because everybody came back to claim their property. Many of the Jews in Helm, it was a pretty comfortable town, had houses or stores or whatever it is, and everybody came back to claim. Nobody liked to see you back. And there was, even at that time, when sometimes we met with the friends from school and so on, and we were sitting on the balconies and talking, they would shoot at us. They shot a couple of people this way. They were very upset that some of the Jews survived. I stayed there for a while. I went back to Lodz. I didn't go back to Krakow anymore. I went back to Lodz, and I found one of the friends I told you, the three sisters that I helped them, I found them, and one of them was a secretary to Gomulka, the deposed, and very, very, very communistic and very this, and she got me a job in a factory as some sort of a supervisor or a secretary, not a supervisor, an office worker, because supervisors they had plenty. And at that time I wanted to enroll in a university. The Russians would not permit me. I was Jewish. The same old thing. You came there was the same old thing. I didn't have this and I didn't have that, and you knew I couldn't move into the dorm. I couldn't do anything just because I couldn't stand it being there. I couldn't get hold of my father, and somewhere the mail was getting lost, and I decided, and there were all kinds of rumors about how you can get to the United States. You can do this, and you can do that, and you can do something else. And eventually, I think a letter came through, and I heard that they sent Jews from Sweden to the United States. So I picked myself up, and I went to Warsaw. I went to the Swedish consulate. Oh, yes, I know. I wrote to my father that I want to go to a DP camp in Germany, because all my friends were going there. So my father said, you will enough in camps to stay in Poland. I'll send you the money until it settles there in Poland, and you'll be able to come regularly. But it wasn't. There was no American embassy in Poland, and there was not even a consul. I went to the consulate. It was all bombed out. So while I saw that the prospect to get the papers for the American visa were very slim, I went up to the Swedish consul. And he says, what makes you think I'll send you? I says, I don't know. I think you're a human being, and I have a father, and I have lived through so much, and I would like to go. So he said that money is needed. The Swedish government requires $1,000 in escrow, that I will not become a welfare case or whatever it is. So I said, well, if you want to cable collect the United States, my father will send you the money. I really didn't know whether he had or he didn't, but I knew they'll find it. So that's what happened. I got, my father deposited $1,000 with the Jewish Joint Distribution in Stockholm, and I came to Stockholm. And there, it was already a different horse of a different color. The Swedish people were very obliging. They were very accommodating. I was waited on the station from like I would say now, it's like a welfare or social service agency. Somebody was there, and they found us a hotel, and I stayed there, and I couldn't get out of there either, because I came like in April the 6th, and in March they closed the quota, so I couldn't go. There were all kinds of things. I don't know, is this something that you would like to know, how I got out of Sweden to come here?
it's through briefly, yeah.
Well, it wasn't through anybody. It was through my speculation that I got out. They tried. My father applied. And I got. My father applied, and they said that the Polish quota is almost exhausted. I'll have to wait a number of years. Of course, wherever I come, I went to school. I went to learn the language, and I also got myself to learn the English language in Sweden. And I was, my pastime was in the American embassy in Stockholm. That's where we're sitting, and that's where we heard gossip, and that's where we heard. Suddenly we heard that if you're going to be, as a Hebrew teacher, you see, you can come to the United States on a preferential quota. I was over 20 already, so I couldn't come on a preferential quota to my father. My father had a heart attack when he heard that I cannot make it from Sweden. But this didn't help because I was over age. So I heard in the embassy, I picked up, somebody that secretly was saying that if you are a Hebrew teacher, you can get to America. So I quickly wrote to my father, make me papers for a Hebrew teacher. I want to go to the United States. So of course they made papers. They had to make fake papers in terms of my age. You know, and then I found out that the consul, and his name was Blodgett. If you want to write it down, because that must be Joseph. Oh shoot, he cannot. Well, as I said, that there was kind of, now that when I look retrospectively, and that I do what I do in terms of understanding some of the psychological phenomena, I could see that the Swedes were almost prostrating themselves for us. They were doing a great deal for us. They were subsidizing education. There were many Jewish people who came there with the Bernadotte transport, and they had TB. And they had many sanatoriums. They were training. It was really, you see, but I went on an independent course, as you can see, from the very beginning. I was never, and that's probably another thing that might be inherent in me, I never belonged to an organization as a kid. And I went it alone. I pulled other people with me, but I never joined others. I tried to solve my problems always by, you know, in my own way. Now, in Sweden, when I heard about that business with the teacher, I also picked up something that there is a little rabbi around the embassy who is working with the ambassador, with whoever it is. They examine you for a teacher. So if you pay this rabbi $100, I don't know whether he was a rabbi or he was a whatever he was. If you pay him $100, he can work it out so that you would know which paragraph you will be asked to read and translate. Now, I was supposed to be asked the paragraph on the walls of Jericho. I went to my friends who knew, and we were studying. While I was studying for that, I went for my preliminary interview, and the guy wanted to know how come that at that time, how could I have been interned for so many years and have the university for a teacher and have some practice for a teacher? See? I had to send papers back to Poland. They should redo my whatever and send me a certificate. I mean, we had one thing, the papers were bombed out. So all I needed is 2 witnesses. So I got sent back to Poland, got 2 witnesses telling them that I was born in 1917 instead of 1920. It was not much. I couldn't do that much. But 3 years gave me something to manipulate in. And while I was preparing about how the walls of Jericho crumbled, I heard some very bad news came to us. There were two girls on Gripsholm going to the United States. They met two young guys, and they went on this, and they were telling to these two young guys how they fooled the American ambassador or consul or whoever it is. They are not really teachers, and those happen to have been, I don't know whether they were FBI men or whatever. The whole deal with the teachers got closed. 1, 2, 3 subito prompto, you couldn't go. So then I heard that you could get to America through Canada. So I quick write to my father, send me papers from Canada. So I went to Canada. There are some people from Helm that live in Canada, and they send me papers. And they send me papers from a sister whose name was Berlin. How do you reconcile? My name is Berland. Her name is Berlin. She's married, there's another name. Well, I didn't care. I was trying to do whatever I could. And while those papers were in work, I contacted spinal meningitis and I was hospitalized. Now, I already had everything set and I was going, and I said, you know, either you send me out, someplace you do something, I don't want to live, I don't want to be. They told me it was polio. I thought I'll be a cripple. And the whole town buried me, the whole community, the Swedish community buried me. But I pulled out of that too. I fought the doctors, I fought everybody. And while I was in the hospital, my father sent a friend who was a Swede. He came to visit me. And from there, I went up to see the Canadian consul. And I was dying. I was really dying with anxiety, because how do you explain to a person, you know, what kind of a story? I only said she went to Canada, she changed her name. It sounded more whatever. But the guy was very decent. I'm sure he knew. He didn't ask me one breath of a question more than necessary. He asked me this question. I gave him this cockeyed answer. He accepted it. He gave me the visa. I was afraid whether I could travel or not. And with that visa, I got chutzpah, and I went to the American consul to see whether I could get a transit visa for the United States. To see who is there, who is on duty that day. And I came in, and Mr. Blodgett was on vacation, and there was a Swedish secretary, an assistant or whatever, lovely guy. I asked to see him, and he saw me, and I cried. I told him I want to see my father, and that it's not really a crime if I want to stop off. He says, well, you can come in a fortnight, you can come from Canada, your father could come there. I says, I have more family, and why should it be so strict, and why should I have to wait a fortnight, and all that kind of stuff. And he says, okay, I'll give you a visa. When I came to the ticket office to ask for a separate trip, he didn't believe me. He had to call the consul. He didn't, because those were things that they really didn't give. Now, when I told my father that I got the visa, then I asked him to send me. I wanted to go via England, because I had to go to the British National Museum. That's what I needed. After all that, that's all I needed. I had to see my father called. He says, are you crazy? Why do you have to see the British National Museum? So I said, I have to see it because I'm never going to go back to that hell to Europe. And I was brought up with all the things in school and at home and with all the things. I said, I want to see it. If I'm never going to come back, I want to see it. So he sent me the ticket. And I stopped in England for a week. And on the way from England, we had engine trouble. Going to the United States, we were laid up in Prestwick for 3 days. And I came into the United States, and they didn't want to let me stay. There was an Irishman, a red-headed guy. I remember him when I went into customs. And he says, I know you're not going to go. And I played innocence. I knew already how to act. I says, what makes you think? Why wouldn't? What's wrong with Canada? Just want to see my family. And he didn't want, and I gave him a story, how how heartless he is, and how I didn't see my father 10 years, and it was 48, 39 he left. And then somebody else said, oh, come on, don't be such a nag, give it to her. And once I came here, I did not intend. I intended, when I told him, I really thought that I will. But then somebody said I went to a lawyer that was doing, specializing in immigration, and he handled the case pretty well. He told me to go down, get myself a social security card, which was illegal, but I went and I got it, and my uncle employed me, and I enrolled in Brooklyn College, and I made the dean's list, second, not knowing the language, mind you, and the lawyer kept, I don't know what happened, and then Truman came out with that anybody who was in the United States before April 49 automatically can apply for citizenship papers. And in 1954 I became a citizen.